The dust swirled around Clara Campbell's boots as she watched the last wagon disappear over the ridge, her heart hammering against her ribs with the terrible realization that her uncle had left her behind without so much as a backward glance. The trading post stood weathered and lonely against the California foothills, its wooden planks bleached gray by countless summers. It was September of 1852, and the autumn sun beat down mercilessly on the packed earth of the yard. Clara's traveling trunk sat at her feet, everything she owned in the world contained within its scarred leather sides. She had been standing there for nearly an hour, watching the horizon with increasingly frantic hope that the wagon train would return, that someone would notice her absence, that her uncle would feel even a flicker of conscience about abandoning his 18-year-old niece at a desolate outpost 50 miles from anywhere civilized. But no dust cloud rose in the distance. No wagon creaked back into view. She pressed trembling fingers to her temples, trying to make sense of what had happened. They had stopped at the trading post just after dawn to purchase supplies. Her uncle had seemed agitated, speaking in hushed tones with the wagon master. Clara had wandered inside to examine the goods, thinking nothing of it. When she emerged 20 minutes later, the entire train was gone, vanished as completely as if the earth had swallowed them whole. The trader, a grizzled man named Hoskins, had barely looked up from his ledger when she rushed to ask if he had seen which direction they went. He grunted and gestured vaguely east. When she pressed him, asking why they would leave without her, he shrugged with infuriating indifference. "Not my concern, miss. Folks do what they do." Clara had run to the edge of the clearing, scanning desperately, but the trail stretched empty in both directions. Now, as the sun climbed higher, reality settled over her like a cold blanket despite the heat. Her uncle had left her intentionally. Perhaps he had tired of the burden of caring for his dead sister's daughter. Perhaps the promise he made on his sister's deathbed meant nothing compared to the inconvenience of another mouth to feed on the long journey to Oregon Territory. Whatever his reasons, she was alone. She turned back toward the trading post, squaring her shoulders despite the fear churning in her stomach. Hoskins was sweeping the porch with desultory strokes, raising more dust than he cleared. "Sir, I need to know when the next wagon train might pass through," Clara said, keeping her voice steady through sheer force of will. He paused, leaning on the broom handle. "Could be days. Could be weeks. Most of the big trains already pass through before the mountain snows come. You got money." Clara's hand went instinctively to the small purse hidden beneath her dress. She had exactly $4.37, saved from doing laundry and mending for other families on the wagon train. Some rooms are $1 a night, meals are 50 cents each. She did the mathematics quickly in her head. At that rate, she could afford perhaps 5 or 6 days before she was completely destitute. "Is there work I might do to earn my keep?" Hoskins looked her up and down with an expression that made her skin crawl. "Might be. Depends on what kind of work you are willing to do." Clara felt ice in her veins despite the heat. She had heard the whispers among the wagon train women about what happened to girls alone in rough country. "I can cook and clean. I can mend and do laundry. Already got a man who does that." He spat tobacco juice into the dirt. "But you can stay in the storage shed out back for free if you are willing to be friendly." She stepped backward, gripping her skirt with white-knuckled hands. "No, thank you." His expression hardened. "Suit yourself. But when that money runs out, you will be sleeping in the dirt with the rattlesnakes." Clara turned away before he could see the tears threatening to spill down her cheeks. She dragged her trunk to the shade of a twisted oak tree and sat down on it, staring at the empty road. "Think," she commanded herself. There had to be a solution. She could not stay here, not with a man like Hoskins and no protection. But she could not walk 50 miles through wilderness country either, not alone, not without supplies or weapons or knowledge of the territory. The morning stretched into afternoon. 2 trappers rode through, eyeing her with undisguised interest until Hoskins came out and spoke to them in low voices. They glanced her way again, and one of them laughed at something Hoskins said. Clara felt her face burn with humiliation and anger. She stood and walked deliberately in the opposite direction. Toward the creek she could hear babbling beyond the trees. The water ran clear and cold over smooth stones. She knelt beside it and splashed her face, then sat back on her heels and allowed herself, finally, to cry. Great heaving sobs that shook her whole body, all the fear and betrayal and loneliness pouring out in hot tears that dripped into the creek and were carried away downstream. When the tears finally subsided, she felt hollowed out but slightly calmer. Crying would not save her. She needed to think practically. Perhaps she could walk to Coloma. The mining town Hoskins had mentioned was a day's ride east. Surely there would be respectable work there, women who needed help with children or households. It would be dangerous to travel alone, but staying here felt more dangerous still. She was walking back toward the trading post when she heard hoofbeats. Her heart leaped with wild, irrational hope. Someone had come back for her. Her uncle had realized his mistake. But the rider who came into view was a stranger, tall and lean in the saddle, his hat pulled low against the sun. He rode a rangy buckskin horse that looked trail-worn but strong. As he drew closer, Clara could see he was young, perhaps mid-20s, with sun-darkened skin and a wary expression. He wore a gun belt and carried himself with the easy confidence of a man accustomed to dangerous country. He dismounted at the trading post and went inside. Clara hesitated, then followed, staying near the door. "Need supplies," the stranger was saying to Hoskins. "Coffee, beans, bacon, ammunition for a Henry rifle." "You got money?" Hoskins asked. The stranger dropped coins on the counter with a hard clink. "I got money." While Hoskins gathered the supplies, the stranger's eyes found Clara standing by the door. He looked at her with mild curiosity, then away, then back again with more focus. She realized how she must appear, her dress dusty and tear-stained, her hair coming loose from its pins, alone in a rough trading post. "You are waiting for someone, miss?" he asked. His voice was deep, with a slight drawl that spoke of Texas or somewhere farther south. She opened her mouth to say yes, that her family would be back any moment, but the lie would not come. Instead, she said simply, "No." Something shifted in his expression. He glanced at Hoskins, who had paused in his gathering of supplies to listen. The stranger's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "You traveling alone?" "I was with a wagon train. They left this morning. They left you behind." The blunt question made her flush with shame, as though it were somehow her fault. "Yes." The stranger studied her for a long moment, and she had the uncanny feeling he was seeing right through her, understanding the whole situation without her having to explain. Then he turned back to Hoskins. "When is the next wagon train expected through?" Hoskins shrugged. "Could be a week or more. Season is getting late." The stranger packed his supplies into his saddlebags with deliberate movements. Clara watched him, something like hope flickering in her chest, though she could not have said why. He seemed different from the trappers, from Hoskins. There was a quality of reserve about him, a quietness that felt like strength rather than weakness. He finished with his bags and turned to face her directly. "Where was your train headed, miss?" "Oregon Territory. The Willamette Valley." He shook his head slowly. "That is a long way. You have people there." "I thought I did. My uncle was taking me to live with his family." "The uncle who left you behind?" It was not a question. Clara nodded, feeling the tears threaten again and blinking them back fiercely. She would not cry in front of strangers again. The cowboy pushed his hat back slightly, revealing dark hair and eyes that were a striking light brown, almost amber in the afternoon sun slanting through the door. "My name is Pierce Thorne. I work cattle down near Coloma when I am not running mustangs up in the hills." "Clara Campbell," she managed. "Miss Campbell, I am going to speak plainly because I think you need plain speaking right now. You cannot stay here. This is not a safe place for a woman alone, and I think you know that. The next wagon train might not come for weeks, and even if it does, they might not take on a lone woman without family or means to pay." Clara felt something crack inside her chest. To hear her desperate situation laid out so baldly made it undeniably real. "I know," she whispered. Pierce looked at Hoskins, and there was nothing friendly in that look. Then he turned back to Clara. "Coloma is not much better, but there are more people, more options, families, churches. You might find work and a safe place. It is a day's ride from here." "I do not have a horse." "No, but I do." He paused, seeming to wrestle with something. "I am headed back that way. I could take you." Clara's breath caught. She wanted to say yes immediately, wanted to throw herself at this stranger's feet in gratitude, but caution made her hesitate. She knew nothing about Pierce Thorne. He could be as dangerous as Hoskins, just better at hiding it. As if reading her thoughts, he said quietly, "I understand if you are wary. I am a stranger and you have no cause to trust me. But I give you my word, I will see you safely to Coloma and help you find respectable lodging, nothing more. You can ask Hoskins about me if you like. I have been trading here for 3 years. Clara glanced at Hoskins, who was watching the exchange with narrowed eyes. "You vouch for this man," Hoskins spat. "Pierce Thorne is honest enough as cowboys go." "Never known him to mistreat a woman, if that is what you are asking." He sounded disappointed, as though he would have preferred a different answer. It was hardly a ringing endorsement, but something in Pierce's steady gaze made Clara want to trust him. What choice did she have? Stay here and inevitably fall victim to Hoskins or the next rough men who came through? Try to walk to Coloma alone through country she did not know? At least with Pierce, she had a chance. "I accept your offer, Mr. Thorne. Thank you." He nodded once, as if the matter was settled. "We will leave within the hour. The days are getting shorter and I want to make good distance before we need to camp for the night." The words made Clara's stomach tighten with new anxiety. Camp for the night. She would be alone in the wilderness with this man. But what else could she do? Pierce went back outside to tend to his horse, and Clara retrieved her trunk from under the oak tree. When she dragged it back to the trading post, Pierce took one look at it and shook his head. "That is too heavy to carry on horseback. You will need to choose what you can fit in a bedroll." Clara stared at the trunk, at the physical representation of everything she owned. Her mother's Bible, the quilt her grandmother had made, her spare dresses and underthings, her father's watch, the only thing she had of his. But Pierce was right. There was no way to transport it all. With shaking hands, she opened the trunk and began to sort through her possessions. The Bible, definitely, the watch, one change of clothes, her warmest shawl, a few personal items that fit in her pockets. Everything else she would have to leave behind. "Hoskins," Pierce called. "You will store this trunk for Miss Campbell. When she is settled in Coloma, she will send word about how to retrieve it." "Storage costs money," Hoskins said. Pierce pulled out more coins and dropped them on the counter. "That should cover it for 6 months. You sell or give away anything in that trunk and I will hear about it. Clear?" There was an edge to his voice that made even Hoskins straighten slightly. "Clear." Clara bundled her chosen items in a spare dress, and Pierce tied it securely behind his saddle. Then he turned to her. "You ever ridden a horse, Miss Campbell?" "A few times when I was younger." "This will be different. We will be riding double and it is a long way. You will sit behind me and hold on. The trail can be rough in places." He swung up into the saddle with easy grace, then reached down to help her up. Clara took his hand, feeling the callous strength of it, and managed to scramble up behind him with only moderate awkwardness. The horse shifted beneath them, adjusting to the double weight. "Put your arms around my waist and hold tight," Pierce instructed. "If you need to stop for any reason, just say so." Clara hesitated only a moment before sliding her arms around him. It felt shockingly intimate, pressed against a stranger's back, but she forced herself to focus on practicalities. This was survival, not propriety. Pierce urged the buckskin forward, and they left the trading post behind. Clara did not look back. She kept her eyes forward, watching the trail unfold before them, trying not to think about everything that had gone wrong, focusing instead on the steady rhythm of the horse's gait and the solid warmth of Pierce's back against her cheek. They rode in silence for a long while. The landscape rolled past in shades of gold and brown, the dry grass of late summer rustling in the wind. Oak trees dotted the hillsides, and in the distance, the Sierra Nevada mountains rose purple and imposing against the sky. It was beautiful country, Clara thought, but harsh. Unforgiving to those who did not understand it. "How long have you been in California?" Clara asked finally, needing to break the silence. "Going on 5 years now. Came out in the early rush like everyone else, thinking I would strike it rich in the gold fields. Did you?" She felt him shake his head. "Found enough color to keep body and soul together, but nothing that made a man wealthy. Most of us did not. The real money is in supplying the miners, not being one, so I drifted into ranch work. Turns out I am better with horses than a pickaxe anyway." "Do you like it, the ranch work?" "I like the horses. The country, the freedom of it. It is a hard life, but it is mine." There was something in the way he said it that made Clara think he had left something behind somewhere that he preferred not to remember. She understood that feeling. "What about you?" Pierce asked. "Where are you from originally?" "Missouri. A little town called Independence. My parents both died of fever 3 years ago. My uncle was their only family and he agreed to take me in. We have been traveling with wagon trains ever since, always heading somewhere new. I thought this time we were finally going to settle, that I would have a home again." She stopped, hearing the bitterness creeping into her voice. "I am sorry," Pierce said quietly. "No one deserves to be cast aside like that." "Why did he do it?" The question burst out of her before she could stop it. "What did I do that was so terrible he could not even tell me to my face he did not want me anymore?" Pierce was silent for a moment. Then he said, "Sometimes people are just small. Weak. It probably had nothing to do with you and everything to do with him being unable to face his own failings." The words should not have been comforting, but somehow they were. The idea that her abandonment was about her uncle's weakness rather than her own worth took some of the sting away. They continued riding as the sun moved across the sky. Pierce occasionally pointed out landmarks, teaching her to read the country. That rocky outcrop was called Buzzard's Roost. The creek they crossed was named Lightning Creek, because a storm had split an old oak tree right down to its roots during a thunderstorm 10 years ago. The trail they followed was an old deer path that had been widened by miners heading to and from the diggings. As the afternoon stretched toward evening, Pierce began scanning the landscape more carefully. "We will need to make camp soon. There is a good spot about a mile ahead with water and shelter." Clara felt her anxiety spike again. Night was coming, and she would be alone in the wilderness with this man. She told herself he had been nothing but courteous so far, that he had no reason to help her if his intentions were not honorable, but fear was not always rational. The campsite Pierce chose was in a small grove of trees near a stream. There was a ring of stones marking where others had built fires before. He helped Clara down from the horse, and she was grateful to stand on solid ground again. Her legs trembled from the long ride, and her back ached from the unaccustomed position. Pierce unsaddled the buckskin and rubbed him down with practiced efficiency, then led him to the stream to drink before hobbling him where he could graze. Clara watched, unsure what she should be doing to help. "Can you gather firewood?" Pierce asked, as if sensing her uncertainty. "Nothing big, just dry kindling and branches about as thick as your wrist." Grateful for a task, Clara set about gathering wood. It felt good to move, to do something useful. By the time she returned with an armload, Pierce had cleared a space in the fire ring and was arranging stones to support a coffee pot. He took the wood she offered and built the fire with the same quiet efficiency he brought to everything else. Soon flames were crackling, and the smell of coffee and frying bacon filled the air. Clara's stomach growled loudly, reminding her she had not eaten since early morning. Pierce glanced at her with the ghost of a smile. "Hungry, starving," she admitted. He handed her a tin plate with bacon, beans, and a piece of hardtack that he had softened over the fire. It was simple food, but Clara ate it as though it were a feast. When they finished eating, Pierce cleaned the dishes in the stream while Clara sat by the fire, feeling the day's exhaustion settle into her bones. When he returned, he unrolled 2 bedrolls on opposite sides of the fire. "You take that one," he said, gesturing to the spot farther from the horses. "I will sleep here. Fire should keep the critters away, but if you hear anything that concerns you, wake me." "Mr. Thorne," Clara began, then hesitated. "Yes. Why are you helping me? You do not know me. You had no obligation to bring me along." Pierce prodded the fire with a stick, sending sparks spiraling into the darkening sky. For a long moment, Clara thought he would not answer. Then he said, "I had a sister, Mary. She was traveling to Sacramento to be married when her stage was attacked by road agents. They killed everyone." His voice was flat, emotionless, but Clara could hear the pain underneath. "That was 2 years ago. I think about it sometimes. Wonder if someone might have helped her if she had gotten away, if she had been alone and scared. I cannot change what happened to Mary, but I can help you. So I am." Clara felt tears prick her eyes again. "I am so sorry. Not your fault." He stood abruptly, as if regretting the confession. "We should sleep. Long day tomorrow." Clara wrapped herself in the blanket Pierce had given her and lay down on the bedroll. Above her, the stars were emerging in a velvet sky, more stars than she had ever seen, brilliant and cold and indifferent. She could hear the stream gurgling, the fire crackling, Pierce's quiet breathing across from her. Despite everything, despite her fear and uncertainty, she felt safer than she had all day. She thought about Mary Thorne, traveling to her wedding, full of hopes and dreams struck down by violence. She thought about her own parents, dead of fever before they could see their dreams realized. She thought about herself, abandoned and lost, saved by a cowboy who grieved his sister. Life was fragile out here, precious. She would not take this second chance for granted. The last thing Clara saw before sleep claimed her was Pierce sitting up by the fire, keeping watch, his rifle across his knees. And she knew, with bone-deep certainty, that he would keep her safe through the night. Morning came with birdsong and the smell of coffee. Clara woke disoriented, her body stiff from sleeping on the ground, but Pierce already had breakfast cooking. He handed her coffee in a tin cup, and she wrapped her hands around it gratefully, sipping the bitter brew. They ate quickly and packed up camp with minimal conversation. Clara was beginning to understand that Pierce was a man of few words, but his actions spoke volumes. He helped her mount the horse, checking that she was secure before swinging up in front of her. And then they were off again, following the trail toward Coloma. The landscape changed as they rode, becoming more rugged. They climbed into foothills scattered with pine trees and manzanita bushes. The air grew cooler, fresher. Pierce pointed out a hawk circling high above, and a deer crashing through brush in the distance. "Tell me about Coloma," Clara said, needing to know what awaited her. "It is a mining town, sprung up after James Marshall found gold in the mill race back in '48. Had thousands of miners at its peak, but it is quieter now. Still enough work to keep people there, though. There is a hotel, a general store, a church. Some families have settled, built proper houses. It is rough around the edges, but there are decent people if you know where to look. And you think I can find work there? I do. There is a woman named Mrs. Sarah Henderson who runs a boarding house. She is respectable, keeps a tight ship. She might have worked for you, or at least she will know who does. I will introduce you." Relief flooded through Clara. A respectable boarding house sounded like exactly what she needed, a place to catch her breath, to figure out what came next. They stopped at midday to water the horse and stretch their legs. Clara walked down to the creek to splash water on her face and neck. When she looked up, Pierce was standing a respectful distance away, his eyes on the trail behind them. "Is something wrong?" she asked. He shook his head slowly. "Just being cautious. This is quiet country, but you never know." They rode on. As the afternoon wore on, Clara found herself relaxing incrementally. Pierce had not made a single inappropriate move or comment. He treated her with careful respect, as though she were something fragile that he did not want to break. It was so different from the way Hoskins had looked at her, from the fear she had felt at the trading post. "How long have you worked at the ranch near Coloma?" she asked. "About 2 years steady. It is the Blackwell place a few miles outside town. Good man, Robert Blackwell. Treats his workers fair, pays on time. I help with the cattle drives and breaking horses. When I am not there, I am up in the high country catching mustangs to sell." "That sounds dangerous." "It can be. But there is nothing quite like riding a wild horse for the first time, feeling all that power and spirit, earning its trust. It is honest work." Clara heard the passion in his voice and smiled. "You love it." "I suppose I do." They crested a hill and Pierce pointed ahead. "There. That is Coloma." Clara leaned to the side to see around him. The town spread out in a valley below, buildings clustered along both sides of a river that glinted silver in the sunlight. She could see the main street lined with false-fronted buildings, tents and shacks scattered on the hillsides, and a church steeple rising above it all. It looked rough and raw, nothing like the tidy town she remembered from Missouri, but it looked like possibility. "It is not much to look at," Pierce said apologetically. "It is perfect," Clara said, and meant it. They rode down into town as the sun began its descent toward the western hills. People stopped to watch them pass, curious eyes following the cowboy and the woman riding double. Clara tried to sit up straight, to look respectable despite her dusty dress and disheveled hair. Pierce navigated through the main street, dodging freight wagons and groups of miners, and stopped in front of a 2-story building with a neatly painted sign that read Henderson House. He dismounted and helped Clara down, his hands steady at her waist. "Wait here," he said, and went inside. Clara stood beside the buckskin, patting his neck nervously. She could feel people staring, hear the whispers. A woman appeared in the doorway of the building across the street, arms crossed, watching with open speculation. Then Pierce emerged with a woman who could only be Mrs. Henderson. She was perhaps 50 years old, stout and stern-faced, with iron-gray hair pulled into a tight bun. Her eyes were sharp as she looked Clara up and down. "This is the girl you mentioned?" Mrs. Henderson asked Pierce. "Yes, madam. Miss Clara Campbell. She found herself in difficult circumstances and needs honest work and safe lodging. Mrs. Henderson's gaze was uncomfortably penetrating. "What kind of difficult circumstances?" Clara lifted her chin. "My family abandoned me at a trading post, madam. Mr. Thorne was kind enough to bring me here. I can cook, clean, mend, do laundry, anything you need. I am a hard worker and I am honest. You in trouble, running from the law? Got a husband or sweetheart coming to claim you?" "No, madam, nothing like that. Just trying to survive." Mrs. Henderson looked at Pierce. "You vouch for her character." "I do not know her well enough to vouch for anything except that she is alone and needs help. But my instinct says she is honest." The older woman snorted. "Your instinct? Well, I suppose that will have to do." She turned back to Clara. "I need help with the cooking and cleaning. The work is hard and I do not tolerate laziness or sass. Room and board plus $2 a week. You steal from me or my guests, I will have the sheriff on you before you can blink." "Understood." "Yes, madam. Thank you, madam. Come on then. Let us get you settled. Pierce, thank you for bringing her." Pierce nodded. He turned to Clara and their eyes met. "You will be safe here, Mrs. Henderson is tough, but she is fair. If you need anything, the Blackwell Ranch is 3 miles northeast of town. Anyone can point you in the right direction." Clara felt a sudden, desperate urge not to let him leave. He had saved her, protected her, brought her to safety. And now he was leaving and she might never see him again. "Mr. Thorne, I do not know how to thank you. You saved my life." Something flickered in his amber eyes. "No thanks necessary, Miss Campbell. I am glad I could help. You take care of yourself." He swung back into the saddle and tipped his hat to both women. Clara watched him ride away down the street, her chest tight with emotions she could not name. Gratitude, certainly. Relief. But something else too, something warmer and more complicated. "Come along," Mrs. Henderson said briskly. "No point standing in the street." Clara followed her inside, into her new life. The Henderson house was clean and orderly if Spartan. Mrs. Henderson showed Clara to a small room on the second floor, barely large enough for a narrow bed and a washstand, but it had a window with a view of the mountains and a door that locked from the inside. After sleeping on the ground, it felt like luxury. "You will start work at 5 tomorrow morning," Mrs. Henderson said. "I will wake you. Breakfast for the guests is at 6. Washing on Monday, ironing on Tuesday, mending on Wednesday. The rest of the time you will clean and help with meals. Questions?" "No, madam." "Good. Supper is in an hour. Come down to the kitchen and I will show you where everything is kept." When Mrs. Henderson left, Clara sat on the bed and let herself breathe. She had a room. She had work. She was safe. 2 days ago she had been traveling with her uncle, thinking her future was settled. Now everything had changed, but somehow she had landed on her feet. No, that was not quite right. Pierce Thorne had caught her when she fell. Without him, she would still be at the trading post at the mercy of Hoskins and whoever else came through. She thought about him riding away, wondered if she would see him again. The ranch was only 3 miles from town. Surely he came into Coloma sometimes. The thought made her heart beat a little faster, and she told herself sternly not to be foolish. Pierce had helped her out of kindness and grief for his sister. Nothing more. But she could not forget the way he had looked at her when they said goodbye, as though he was memorizing her face, as though saying goodbye was harder than he wanted to admit. Clara unpacked her few belongings and changed into her spare dress. Then she went downstairs to learn her new duties and begin her new life in Coloma. The days fell into a rhythm. Clara woke before dawn and worked until after dark, cooking and cleaning and tending to the needs of Mrs. Henderson's guests. The work was exhausting, but it was honest, and Clara threw herself into it with determination. She would prove she could stand on her own, that she did not need family or charity to survive. Mrs. Henderson was demanding but fair, just as Pierce had said. She did not praise often, but when Clara did something particularly well, she would give a curt nod of approval that felt like high praise. The other servant, a Chinese man named Y who did the heavy work, was kind in a quiet way, showing Clara where things were kept and how Mrs. Henderson liked things done. The boarding house guests were mostly miners and merchants passing through, though a few were more permanent residents working claims nearby. Clara learned to navigate their rough manners and occasional inappropriate comments with a cool dignity that usually shut them down quickly. When it did not, Mrs. Henderson intervened with a tongue that could strip paint. On Clara's third day, a woman came to the boarding house asking for washing to be done. Mrs. Henderson sent Clara to collect it, and the woman invited her inside for tea. Her name was Elizabeth Hartley, and she was a young mother with 2 small children and a husband who worked a claim up in the hills. "It is so nice to see another young woman in town," Elizabeth said warmly. "Most of the women here are either very young or very old or very much not respectable, if you know what I mean," Clara knew. She had seen the painted women who worked in the saloons, had heard Mrs. Henderson's disapproving sniffs when they passed by. "How long have you been in Coloma?" Clara asked. "Nearly a year. It is hard country, but John thinks we can make enough to buy a proper farm back in Illinois if we stay another year or 2. I hope he is right. I miss trees that are not all pines and oaks. I miss green." "I miss Missouri," Clara confessed. "The fireflies in summer. The way everything smelled after a rain." They smiled at each other, understanding perfectly. Over the following weeks, Clara and Elizabeth became friends. Elizabeth introduced her to other families in town, the ones trying to build something permanent rather than just chase gold. There was the Reverend Walsh and his wife at the church, the Hartwell family who ran the general store, the Coopers who had built a schoolhouse and were trying to convince enough families to stay to make it worthwhile. Clara attended Sunday services at the little church and joined the women's sewing circle that met on Thursday afternoons when she could get away. Slowly, painstakingly, she was building a life. It was not the life she had imagined, but it was hers. She had been in Coloma for nearly 3 weeks when Pierce Thorne rode back into town. Clara was hanging laundry in the yard behind the boarding house when she heard his voice in the front. Her heart jumped in a way that she told herself was simple recognition, nothing more. She hurried around to the front porch, wiping her damp hands on her apron. Pierce was standing with his hat in his hands, talking to Mrs. Henderson. He looked the same as Clara remembered, tall and sun-weathered and steady. When he saw Clara, his face brightened in a way that made her breath catch. "Miss Campbell, it is good to see you. Mr. Thorne, what brings you to town? I had business at the general store. Thought I would stop by and see how you are settling in." "She is a good worker," Mrs. Henderson said grudgingly. "Pulls her weight." Pierce smiled, a real smile that transformed his usually serious face. "I am glad to hear it. I will leave you 2 to talk," Mrs. Henderson said, and went back inside with more tact than Clara would have given her credit for. "You look well," Pierce said. "Are you managing all right?" "I am. Mrs. Henderson is fair and the work is honest. I have even made some friends in town. Thank you for bringing me here. I am relieved to see you are all right. I have been thinking about you, wondering if I did the right thing." "You did. You saved me, Mr. Thorne. I will never forget that." They stood looking at each other, and Clara felt the air between them grow charged with something unspoken. She wanted to ask him to stay, to talk longer, but she could not think of a reason that would not sound forward. Pierce cleared his throat. "Well, I should let you get back to your work. But Miss Campbell, if you ever need anything, anything at all, Please send word to the ranch. I would come right away. Thank you. That is very kind. He settled his hat back on his head and mounted his horse. Clara watched him ride away, feeling strangely bereft. 3 weeks she had been in Coloma, and she had thought about Pierce Thorne far more often than was reasonable. She told herself it was simply gratitude, hero worship, nothing more substantial, but her heart knew better. Pierce started coming to town more frequently after that. Always with a reason. Supplies to buy, a horse to sell, business with someone in town. And he always stopped by the Henderson house, always asked how Clara was doing, always stayed to talk for a few minutes. The visits were proper, often with Mrs. Henderson or other people present, but Clara found herself looking forward to them with an intensity that frightened her. She learned things about Pierce in those brief conversations. That his parents had died when he was 16, leaving him and Mary to fend for themselves. That he had worked on ranches in Texas and New Mexico before coming to California. That he was teaching himself to read better by studying a book of Shakespeare's plays that had belonged to his mother. That he loved the sound of rain on a tent and hated the taste of rhubarb and wanted someday to own his own land. And Pierce learned about her. Her love of singing, though she rarely did it anymore. Her memory of her mother's rose garden. Her dream of someday owning a bookshop, though it seemed impossibly far away. Her fear of thunderstorms and her love of apple pie, and the way she missed having family, real family people who chose to be there. 6 weeks after Clara arrived in Coloma, Pierce asked her to go walking with him after church on Sunday. It was a bold request, one that made the women in the sewing circle whisper and speculate. But Mrs. Henderson, after studying Pierce with her sharp eyes, gave permission as long as they stayed where people could see them. They walked along the river, the autumn sun warm on their faces. The cottonwoods were turning gold, and the air smelled of fallen leaves and river water. "I have been wanting to talk to you properly," Pierce said, "not just quick conversations on Mrs. Henderson's porch." "I am glad you asked," Clara admitted. "I have enjoyed our talks." "Have you?" He sounded almost surprised, as though he could not quite believe it. "Of course." "You are easy to talk to, Mr. Thorne, Pierce," he said. "If we are going to be friends, you should call me Pierce." "Only if you call me Clara," he smiled. "Clara." The way he said her name made warmth bloom in her chest. They walked in comfortable silence for a while, watching the river flow past. Then Pierce said, "Can I ask you something, of course? Do you ever think about leaving Coloma, going back east, or trying to reach Oregon?" Clara considered the question. "Sometimes." "But what would I be going back to? Missouri has no family for me anymore. Oregon is full of people who did not care enough to notice when I was left behind. Here I have work and friends and a life I built myself. That means something." Pierce nodded slowly. "I understand that. The building something yourself part. It is why I like it out here. No one cares who your family was or where you came from, just what you can do and whether your word is good." "Exactly." Clara glanced at him. "What about you? Do you ever think about leaving?" "Not anymore. I did at first after Mary died. Thought I might go back to Texas, but California got into my blood somehow. This is home now." They stopped walking and Pierce turned to face her. "Clara, I want to be honest with you about something. I did not just happen to check on you at the trading post that day. I did happen to be there, but the way I acted, offering to bring you here, that was not just about Mary. It was about you." Clara's heart began to pound. "What do you mean?" "I mean when I saw you standing there, looking lost and scared and so damn determined not to cry, something in my chest twisted. I wanted to help you, yes, but I also wanted to know you. And every time I have seen you since, that feeling has gotten stronger. You are brave, Clara. You are kind and strong, and you see the good in things even when you have every reason not to. I admire that. I admire you." Clara could barely breathe. "Pierce, I know it is too soon. I know you are still finding your feet here, and that you have no reason to think of me as anything but the man who helped you when you needed it. But I wanted you to know that my intentions are honorable. I would like to court you properly, if you would allow it." For a moment, Clara could not speak. Her mind raced. Pierce Thorne wanted to court her. The man who had saved her, who had been nothing but kind and respectful, who made her feel safe and valued and seen. The man she had been thinking about far too often, whose visits had become the bright spots in her weeks. "Yes," she whispered. "Yes, I would like that very much." The smile that broke across Pierce's face was like sunshine after rain. "Truly, truly, I have been hoping you would ask." He took her hand, the first time he had touched her beyond helping her on or off his horse, and Clara felt the connection like a physical thing, warm and electric. They stood there by the river, hands clasped, grinning at each other like fools. And Clara thought that maybe, just maybe, being abandoned at the trading post had been the best thing that ever happened to her. The courtship that followed was the happiest time of Clara's life. Pierce came to town twice a week, on Wednesday evenings and Sundays after church. They walked together, always properly chaperoned by distance if not by actual people. They talked about everything and nothing, learning each other's hearts. Pierce brought her small gifts, a book of poems he thought she would like, a hair ribbon from the general store, wildflowers picked from the meadows near his ranch. Clara baked his favorite foods and mended his shirts, and listened with genuine interest when he talked about his horses and the ranch work. Mrs. Henderson watched their courtship with approval, and when the church ladies commented on how quickly things were moving, she said tartly, "When you know, you know. Those two are well suited." Elizabeth Hartley was delighted, claiming she had known from the first time Clara mentioned Pierce that something was brewing. "The way your face lights up when you say his name," she teased. "You are smitten." Clara could not deny it. She was smitten, deeply and thoroughly. Pierce made her feel treasured in a way she had never experienced before. He listened when she spoke, remembered the details of her stories, respected her opinions even when they disagreed. He never tried to push for more than she was ready to give, content to build their relationship slowly and properly. And Clara, who had spent years feeling like an obligation to her uncle, like an extra mouth to feed and a burden to carry, felt herself blooming under Pierce's attention. 3 months after their courtship began, as winter settled into the Sierra foothills, Pierce invited Clara to come see the ranch. Mrs. Henderson agreed to chaperone, and they made the 3-mile journey on a crisp December morning. The Blackwell Ranch was larger than Clara had expected, with a sprawling ranch house, several barns and outbuildings, and corrals full of horses. Robert Blackwell met them at the house, a weathered man in his 50s with a kind face and a firm handshake. "So you are the young lady we have been hearing so much about," he said to Clara. "Pierce talks about you constantly." Clara blushed, and Pierce looked embarrassed but pleased. Mrs. Blackwell, a plump, cheerful woman, welcomed them warmly and insisted they stay for lunch. Over a meal of roast beef and vegetables, Clara learned that the Blackwells had come to California in the early gold rush days, but Robert had quickly realized the real opportunity was in ranching. They had built their operation from nothing, weathering droughts and harsh winters and cattle thieves. After lunch, Pierce showed Clara around the ranch. He introduced her to his favorite horses, a spirited bay mare named Copper and the buckskin gelding that had carried them to Coloma. He showed her the foothills where the mustangs ran wild and the pastures where the cattle grazed. "This is where I feel most myself," Pierce said as they stood on a hill overlooking the ranch. "Not penned in, free to move and breathe." Clara understood. She felt the same way, looking out over the golden hills rolling to the horizon. "It is beautiful. Clara, I need to tell you something." Pierce took her hands, his expression serious. "I have been saving money for years, working every job I can, spending as little as possible. I have almost enough to buy land of my own. Not a big place, not at first, but enough for horses and cattle, a house, a future." Clara's heart began to race. She knew what he was asking without him having to say it. "I know we have not been courting long," Pierce continued. "By society's standards, I should wait longer before I say what I am about to say. But Clara, I am not a patient man when it comes to things that matter. And you matter. You matter more than anything else in my life." He dropped to one knee right there on the hilltop, still holding her hands. "Clara Campbell, would you do me the honor of becoming my wife? I cannot promise you riches or an easy life. What I can promise is that I will work every day to make you happy, to give you a home and a family and all the love I have in my heart. Will you marry me?" Tears streamed down Clara's face, but she was smiling so hard her cheeks ached. "Yes, yes, Pierce, I will marry you." He stood and pulled her into his arms, and Clara went willingly, feeling his heart beating against hers. They held each other as the wind rustled through the grass and the winter sun shone down, and Clara thought that she had never felt so perfectly happy, so exactly where she was meant to be. When they finally pulled apart, Pierce cupped her face in his hands. "I love you, Clara. I think I started falling in love with you the moment I saw you at the trading post, looking so fierce and frightened and brave." "I love you too," Clara whispered. "I did not know it at first, but my heart did. It chose you before my mind caught up." They walked back to the ranch house hand in hand, grinning like idiots. When they announced their engagement, Mrs. Henderson looked smug, as though she had orchestrated the whole thing. Mrs. Blackwell clapped her hands in delight and immediately began planning the wedding. "You will have it at the church in town," she decided. "In the spring, when the wildflowers are blooming. I will make your dress, Clara. It will be beautiful." Clara laughed, overwhelmed by the sudden generosity and kindness. "You do not have to do all that. Nonsense. You are going to be part of our ranch family. Pierce is like a son to us. Of course we will help." The ride back to town was magical. Mrs. Henderson dozed in the back of the wagon, and Pierce drove with one hand so he could hold Clara's with the other. They made plans quietly, talking about where they would build their house, what they would name their children, how many horses Pierce wanted to raise. 3 children at least, Pierce said. "Boys or girls does not matter as long as they are healthy." "I would like a big family," Clara agreed. "I spent so long with just my uncle and he never really wanted me there. I want a house full of noise and love and chaos. We will have that. I promise." When they reached the Henderson house, Pierce helped Clara down from the wagon and walked her to the door. Mrs. Henderson had gone inside, giving them a moment of privacy. "I cannot quite believe this is real," Clara said. "6 months ago I was abandoned and alone. Now I am engaged to the best man I have ever known." "I am the lucky one," Pierce said. "You came into my life like a gift I did not know I needed. I will spend the rest of my days being worthy of you." He kissed her then, a soft, sweet kiss that spoke of promises and hope and forever. Clara melted into it, feeling the rightness of it in her bones. When they finally parted, both of them flushed and breathless, Pierce said, "Spring cannot come fast enough." Clara laughed. "We will make it through the winter, and then we will have the rest of our lives." The next months were a whirlwind of preparation. The women of Coloma rallied around Clara, helping with the wedding plans, sewing her dress, teaching her the things about marriage and homemaking that her mother had not lived long enough to share. Elizabeth became her chief confidante, offering advice and support and excitement. Pierce continued working at the Blackwell Ranch, saving every penny toward their future land. He showed Clara the parcel he had his eye on, 20 acres in a valley with good water and grazing. It was not much, but it was theirs, or would be soon. In February, Pierce finalized the purchase. Clara stood beside him at the land office in town, watching him sign the papers that made them landowners. Her heart swelled with pride. Pierce had done this through sheer hard work and determination. No inheritance, no lucky gold strike, just honest labor and careful saving. That evening they rode out to the land together. Snow dusted the hills, and their breath misted in the cold air. They walked the boundaries of their property, planning where the house would go, where the barn and corrals would be built, where Clara would plant a garden. "We will start small," Pierce said. "A cabin at first, maybe just 2 rooms, but we will add on as we can. By the time we have children, there will be space for them." "It will be perfect," Clara assured him. "As long as we are together, it will be perfect." They stood in the center of what would someday be their home, wrapped in each other's arms against the cold. The sun was setting, painting the snow-covered hills in shades of pink and gold. Clara thought about how far she had come, from abandoned and alone to loved and chosen. Pierce had not just saved her life that day at the trading post. He had given her a future. The wedding took place on a bright April morning, with wildflowers blooming across the hills just as Mrs. Blackwell had predicted. The little church was packed with people from town and the ranch, all come to witness Clara Campbell marry Pierce Thorne. Clara wore the dress Mrs. Blackwell and the church ladies had made, simple white cotton with blue embroidery at the collar and cuffs. She carried a bouquet of wildflowers that Elizabeth had picked that morning. Her hair was pinned up with the ribbon Pierce had given her during their courtship. She walked down the aisle alone, with no father or uncle to give her away, but she did not feel alone. The community that had embraced her was there, and at the end of the aisle stood Pierce, looking overwhelmed and happy in a new shirt and vest. When Clara reached him, he took her hands and Reverend Walsh began the ceremony. Clara heard the words as if from a distance, too focused on Pierce's face, on the love and wonder in his amber eyes. When it came time for the vows, she spoke clearly and firmly, meaning every word. "I, Clara Campbell, take you, Pierce Thorne, to be my husband. I promise to love you, honor you, and stand by your side in joy and in sorrow, in plenty and in want, for all the days of my life." Pierce's voice was rough with emotion when he repeated his own vows. "I, Pierce Thorne, take you, Clara Campbell, to be my wife. I promise to love you, protect you, and cherish you for all the days of my life. You saved me from loneliness, Clara. You brought light into my world. I will never take that for granted." They exchanged simple gold bands, and then Reverend Walsh pronounced them husband and wife. When Pierce kissed her, the church erupted in applause and cheers. The celebration afterward was held at the Henderson house, with Mrs. Henderson providing food and the Blackwells contributing generously. There was music and dancing, and Clara danced with Pierce until her feet ached and her face hurt from smiling. As the sun began to set, Pierce and Clara slipped away to the cabin Pierce had built on their land. It was small and simple, just as he had promised, but Clara thought it was the most beautiful place she had ever seen. Pierce had made furniture from rough-hewn wood, and Mrs. Blackwell had provided curtains and bedding. There were flowers in a jar on the table, and the fireplace was laid ready to light. Pierce carried Clara over the threshold, both of them laughing. He set her down gently and lit the fire while Clara looked around her new home. Their home. Happy? Pierce asked, coming to stand behind her and wrapping his arms around her waist. Clara leaned back against him. So happy I could burst. I never imagined I could feel this way. Neither did I. He turned her to face him. Clara Thorne, I love the sound of that. So do I. They stood together in the firelight, husband and wife, beginning their new life. And when Pierce led her to their bed and loved her with gentle reverence, Clara felt the last pieces of her broken heart heal completely. She was no longer alone. She was no longer unwanted. She was cherished and treasured and home. The first year of marriage was not easy, but it was good. Pierce worked from dawn to dusk, building their ranch from nothing. Clara worked alongside him, tending their small garden, caring for their growing herd of horses, keeping their home. It was hard labor, but they did it together, and that made all the difference. They had help from the Blackwells and their friends in town. When it came time to build a barn, half the men in Coloma showed up with tools and willing hands. The women brought food and worked beside Clara in the garden, teaching her which plants thrived in California soil. By winter, they had a sturdy barn, a corral full of good horses, and enough money saved to expand the cabin. Pierce added another room, giving them more space and privacy. It was during that winter that Clara realized she was pregnant. She had suspected for a few weeks, but when she woke feeling nauseous for the third morning in a row, she knew for certain. She told Pierce that evening as they sat by the fire. "Pierce, I have something to tell you." He looked up from the harness he was mending, his expression concerned at her serious tone. "What is it? Are you all right?" "I am more than all right. I am expecting a baby." For a moment, Pierce just stared at her. Then he dropped the harness and crossed to her in 2 long strides, pulling her into his arms. "A baby, truly, truly." Clara laughed at his excitement. "Are you happy?" "Happy." He pulled back to look at her face, his eyes shining. "Clara, I am beyond happy. I am terrified and thrilled and overwhelmed. We are going to be parents." "We are going to be parents," Clara echoed, and the reality of it hit her fully. A baby. Their baby. A family. Pierce placed his hand gently on her still flat stomach. "Hello in there, little one. Your mama and I cannot wait to meet you." The pregnancy was relatively easy, and Clara continued working as long as she could, though Pierce fussed over her constantly. When her belly grew too large for comfort, she focused on indoor tasks, sewing tiny clothes and preparing for the baby's arrival. Elizabeth Hartley, now expecting her third child, was a wealth of advice and reassurance. Mrs. Blackwell promised to be there for the birth, and the women of Coloma organized supplies and help. The baby came in late summer, on a hot August day. Clara labored for hours with Mrs. Blackwell and Elizabeth in attendance, Pierce pacing outside, too anxious to stay away but too nervous to be present. When the baby finally arrived with a healthy, angry cry, Mrs. Blackwell opened the door and called out, "Pierce Thorne, come meet your son." Pierce burst into the room, his face white with worry that transformed to wonder when he saw Clara holding a tiny bundle. "A son, a son," Clara confirmed, exhausted but radiant. "Come see him." Pierce approached slowly as though afraid he might break something. Clara folded back the blanket, revealing a red-faced infant with a shock of dark hair and tiny fists waving in the air. "He is perfect," Pierce breathed. "Clara, he is absolutely perfect." "We should name him," Clara said. "What do you think of Paul, after your father?" Pierce's eyes filled with tears. "You would do that, of course. He is part of your family, part of our family. Paul Thorne." Pierce tested the name. "It is a good, strong name." He reached out a tentative finger and baby Paul immediately grasped it with surprising strength. Pierce laughed, a sound of pure joy. "He already has a good grip. He will be a horseman for sure." Clara watched her husband fall in love with their son, her heart so full she thought it might overflow. This was her family. These two people who depended on her and loved her and chose her every single day. She had gone from abandoned and alone to this, to a husband who adored her and a baby they had created together. "Thank you," Pierce said softly, looking at Clara. "Thank you for giving me this. For giving us this." "Thank you for riding back for me," Clara replied. "When no one else would, you did. You saved me, Pierce." "We saved each other," he corrected. "I was alone too before you, surviving but not really living. You changed that." They sat together, the three of them, while the sun set outside and the crickets began their evening song. It was a moment of perfect peace, perfect happiness. And Clara knew, with absolute certainty, that this was what she had been meant for all along. Not the life her uncle had planned, not the uncertain future she had faced at the trading post, but this. Family, love, home. The years that followed brought more children. A daughter named Catherine 2 years after Paul, and then twins, a boy and girl they named Samuel and Sarah, 3 years after that. The cabin expanded to accommodate the growing family, adding rooms and a proper second story. The ranch prospered too. Pierce's reputation as a horseman spread, and people came from miles around to buy his horses. Clara managed the household and helped with the books, her neat handwriting and good mathematics skills proving invaluable. They hired help as they could afford it, but they never forgot what it was like to have nothing, to start from scratch. They went to Coloma every Sunday for church, and Clara maintained her friendships there. Mrs. Henderson, now aging but still sharp, always greeted them warmly, proud to have played a part in their story. The Blackwells became like grandparents to the children, doting and generous. When Paul was 8 years old, Clara told him the story of how she and Pierce met. They were sitting on the porch watching the sun set, Paul full of questions about everything. "How did you know Papa was the right one?" he asked. Clara thought about it. "I think my heart knew before my head did. He was kind when he did not have to be. He saw me when I felt invisible. And he made me feel safe and valued and loved. Those are the things that matter in a marriage, Paul. Not how much money someone has or what they look like, but how they treat you when things are hard." "I want to marry someone like that someday," Paul said seriously. "You will. And I hope you will be that kind of person for them too." Pierce came out to join them, settling into his rocking chair with a satisfied groan. "Long day." "Good day, though," Clara said, reaching over to take his hand. "Very good day." He squeezed her fingers. "Every day with you is good, Clara Thorne." Paul made a face. "You two are always so mushy." They laughed, and Pierce ruffled his son's hair. "You just wait. Someday you will understand." As the years continued to pass, Pierce and Clara's love deepened and matured. They weathered droughts and harsh winters, sick children and financial worries, but they weathered them together. Their partnership was built on mutual respect and genuine affection, and it showed in everything they did. When the children were old enough, they helped on the ranch, learning the skills their parents had mastered. Paul showed his father's gift with horses, while Catherine had her mother's head for numbers and organization. The twins were wild and adventurous, keeping everyone on their toes. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Pierce took Clara back to the hill where he had proposed. The children were with the Blackwells for the day, giving them rare time alone. "I have been thinking," Pierce said as they stood looking out over the land they had built together, "about the day I found you at the trading post." "I think about it too," Clara admitted. "How terrified I was, how certain I was that my life was over." "What would you say to that girl now, if you could?" Clara considered. "I would tell her that sometimes the worst things that happen to us lead to the best things. That being abandoned by someone who did not value her made room for someone who does. That she is stronger than she knows, and that good things are coming. So many good things." Pierce pulled her close. I would tell my past self to stop being scared and kiss you sooner, to not waste a single moment of our time together." Clara laughed and kissed him, still feeling the spark that had been there from the beginning. "We have had plenty of moments, thousands of them, and we have thousands more ahead. I love you, Clara, more now than on our wedding day, and I loved you a tremendous amount then. I love you too. Thank you for riding back for me. Always," Pierce promised. "I will always ride back for you." They stood together on the hill, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors. Below them, their ranch spread out, the fruits of their labor and love. Smoke rose from the chimney of their home, waiting to welcome them back. Their children were safe and happy, growing strong and confident. Clara thought about how far she had come, from the frightened girl at the trading post to the woman she was now. Mother, wife, rancher, friend. She had built a life she was proud of, surrounded by people who loved her not out of obligation but out of genuine care. And it had all started because one cowboy, grieving his sister and carrying his own loneliness, had seen a young woman in need and decided to help. That simple act of kindness had changed both their lives forever. As they walked back down the hill hand in hand, Clara sent a silent thank you to whatever twist of fate had brought Pierce Thorne to that trading post on that particular day. She would never know why her uncle had abandoned her, and she no longer cared. His cruelty had inadvertently been the greatest gift he could have given her, because it had led her to Pierce. The years continued to roll by, bringing joys and sorrows as all lives do. Pierce's hair went gray at the temples, and Clara found laugh lines around her eyes. Their children grew up, fell in love, started families of their own. Paul married a ranch hand's daughter and took over more of the daily operations. Catherine married a merchant in Coloma and moved to town, but visited often. The twins eventually left California to see more of the world, but they always came home. Through it all, Pierce and Clara remained each other's constant. They rocked on the porch in the evenings, holding hands and watching the sun set. They danced in the kitchen when no one was watching. They still talked for hours, never running out of things to say. On their 30th anniversary, surrounded by children and grandchildren, Pierce stood to make a toast. 30 years ago, I married the bravest, kindest, most beautiful woman I have ever known. She has made every day of my life better just by being in it. Clara, my love, you were worth riding back for 1,000 times over. Clara stood and kissed him, not caring who was watching. And you, Pierce Thorne, are still the most wonderful man I have ever known. Thank you for seeing me when I felt invisible. Thank you for choosing me. Thank you for building this life with me. The celebration continued late into the night, filled with music and laughter and love. When everyone had finally gone to bed or headed home, Pierce and Clara sat on their porch one last time, looking up at the stars. "You have any regrets?" Pierce asked quietly. Clara thought about it, really thought. Then she shook her head. "Not a single one. Every hard moment led me here to you, to this. How could I regret that? I feel the same way. Even the pain of losing Mary, as terrible as that was, made me the man who could appreciate you, who could see what we might build together." They sat in comfortable silence, the kind that only comes from decades of partnership. Finally, Clara said, "I wonder sometimes what happened to my uncle, if he ever felt guilty for what he did." "Does it matter?" "No," Clara realized. "It does not. He made his choice, and I am grateful for it now. If he had not left me behind, I might never have met you. Our children would not exist. This life we have built would not be real. So in a strange way, I should thank him. You are more generous than I am. I would still like to punch him." Clara laughed, the sound bright in the darkness. "My fierce protector. Always." As they finally went inside to bed, Clara took one last look at their ranch, their home, the physical manifestation of everything they had worked for and dreamed of. The little cabin had grown into a proper ranch house. The small herd of horses had become one of the most respected breeding operations in the territory. Their family had flourished, spreading roots deep into California soil. And it had all started because one cowboy had ridden back when no one else would, in the bedroom they had shared for 3 decades. Pierce helped Clara with her buttons as he had done thousands of times before. She leaned against him, feeling the solid strength that had always been her anchor. "I love you," she said simply. "I love you too," Pierce replied, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Every day, Clara, every single day." They lay down together, fitting together perfectly as they always had. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees, and somewhere in the distance, a coyote called. The sounds of California, the sounds of home. Clara drifted off to sleep with Pierce's arm around her, thinking that she was the luckiest woman alive. She had been abandoned once, left behind and alone. But then Pierce Thorne had ridden into her life, and everything had changed. He had given her a home, a family, a love that endured through decades. Some people went their whole lives searching for what Clara had found that day at the trading post. Someone who saw their worth, who chose them again and again, who loved them not despite their vulnerabilities, but because of their whole self, flaws and strengths alike. She had been abandoned at a trading post, frightened and alone, and a cowboy had ridden back for her when no one else would. That single act of kindness, of seeing and caring, had blossomed into a lifetime of love. It was the story Clara would someday tell her grandchildren and great-grandchildren, the story of how the worst day of her life had led to all the best days that followed. As she slipped into dreams, Clara's last conscious thought was one of profound gratitude. For Pierce, for their family, for the life they had built together from nothing but determination and love. For second chances and new beginnings, and the courage to trust again after betrayal. The trading post where she had been left behind was long gone now, reclaimed by the wilderness. But Clara remained, thriving, surrounded by love, living proof that sometimes the end of one story is just the beginning of something beautiful.